Okay, this is Mrs. Boone here. We're going to do a quick tutorial of how to set up your file for laser engraving. So you should already have a file set up. Some of the things that we need to talk about are expanding lines, creating outlines of text, and combining shapes that are overlapping. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert some text and lines and objects, similar to what you guys might have in your design. So here we go. It's a recycling project, so let's go with that theme here. Okay, so I've got a word. I'm going to draw a couple of lines here. Right, attention to detail, making sure things line up here. All right, I'm just going to copy and paste a couple of times. And I'm also going to add, let's resize this so that it fits nicely. There we go. And I'm going to draw a random unique shape. Let's see if I can draw a tree. Look at this funky looking tree. All right, there's my tree. I'm going to fill it in, and I'm going to overlap it on one of my letters here. All right, so there's my recycling design. Hopefully yours is more interesting than mine, and you don't have a tree that looks like some kind of web-footed duck. So first thing we need to think about, you guys should already know how to do this, expanding your letters. Anytime you have words in here, one, you need to make sure they're spelled correctly, and two, we need to make sure that they're outlines. So to check your spelling before you make outlines of anything, you can go to Edit, yep, and then check spelling. Okay, there is a shortcut, Control-I, if you want to just go ahead and push Control-I. This is only going to work if you have not created outlines of your words. If you've already created outlines of your words, you need to go through and read very carefully what you've written on your design to make sure it's spelled correctly, because check spelling only works before you create outlines of text. So I'm going to check my spelling, push Start. There's no misspelled words. I spelled recycle correctly, so I'm going to push Done. If you have misspelled words, it's going to give you the suggested spelling. You can push Change. If you think it's still spelled correctly, you can ignore it, just like in Microsoft Word. So once you've checked the spelling, we're going to create outlines. So I'm selecting my word with my black arrow, and then I'm going to right-click on it and create outlines. Remember, this puts anchor points on your letters. They're no longer letters, they're shapes. I can't change the font of this anymore. It's set in stone now. Right? In order for me to change it, I would have to retype it. Okay? Then I need to worry about some of these overlapping areas. All right? We haven't really talked about this before, but anytime you have two overlapping shapes, the laser engraver doesn't really like this. Because what it thinks is, it thinks it's going to engrave this E, and then it's going to engrave the tree on top of it, and this overlapping area is going to end up engraved twice. We don't really want that. So I need to combine them. There's a window called the Pathfinder window. Find it. You go to Window, and then you may need to scroll down with this arrow on your computer, but on mine it just says Pathfinder. Okay, so Window, Pathfinder. This little window will pop up. I have mine actually pinned to the side because I use it so often. And the option that we're going to use for this is the very first one. So all I've done is I've selected my word that is now outlines. I can shift-click my tree, or I can click and drag over them both to select both objects. Then I'm going to go to my Pathfinder window and click the very first option, which says Unite. Notice those blue lines disappeared. This is one shape now. There's no overlapping shapes. They've combined into one shape. Yes, there is another way to do this. Yes, we can use our shape builder tool. Yes, we can click and drag through these to get the same final effect. Okay, whichever you prefer. The Pathfinder window does have some added benefits to it. Some of you may run into issues where you need to cut out middles of shapes or something more intricate, and I can help you with that individually. But this should hopefully solve most of the problems of your overlapping shapes for this particular project. All right, so I've dealt with my overlapping shape issue. Created outlines of my word. Now I'm going to come to these lines. Okay, so right now these lines are exactly that. They are just lines. Notice how the blue path is in the middle of the stroke, right? There's a stroke weight on this. It's 8-point stroke weight. There's no lines on either side. It's only in the middle. So in order for this to engrave properly, we need to take these lines and make them into shapes. Okay? So to do that, we're going to select our lines, and we're going to expand them. Right? Pay attention to where this blue line is. That's how you'll know they've been expanded. Okay? So to expand the lines, once they're selected, I'm going to go to Object, and then click on Expand. So once I click Object Expand, this little window pops up that says Expand. I can expand the fill and the stroke. In this instance, there really is no fill color. If you look at your color swatches on the left side or at the top, there is no fill color. Okay? So I'm really only expanding the stroke. You can just push OK, and boom. Notice those blue lines changed. You can see them a little bit more right here where it overlaps with my R. But now these are no longer strokes. I can't change the stroke weight anymore because there's no stroke color. There's only a fill color. So now I've got rectangular shapes instead of lines. Okay, this is what the laser engraver needs to see in order to engrave these properly. So now again, we're left with some overlapping shapes. We've got our strokes that have been expanded into rectangles and our letter that overlaps. So I'm just going to hold Shift and click my R so that I can select both things. I've got my rectangle selected and I've got my letter R selected. And it's the same thing we did with the tree. I'm going to come over to my Pathfinder window, which is already open. Remember, if yours is closed or you can't find it, you can go to Window, and it says Pathfinder. And we're going to unite with this very first option here. If you hover, it says Unite. And now this is all one shape. So these rectangles are connected to the letter R, and the tree is connected to the letter E. All right, so we've got our design simplified. That's important. So once we've got our design simplified, we've talked about colors a little bit and how important that is for laser engraving. There's two colors that you may need to worry about in order to get the design to engrave properly for you. Those colors are red and black. Okay, we did this design in black and white only on purpose. The black portions that you have in your design are going to be engraved. Whatever is white will be left alone. Okay? So red is the only color that we didn't really talk about, and most of you may not have in your design. Red is going to tell the laser engraver to cut it out, literally cutting out shapes. So if I drew a square, and I took the fill out of it, and I gave it a specific color red outline, which I'll show you in just a second, what it's going to do is, in my material, it's going to cut a square out. Right? It's going to cut it out. So first, let's talk about the color black. The laser engraver works in an RGB format. Okay? So in order to get our file set up in the correct color mode, we need to go to File, Document Color Mode. Okay? So go to File, Document Color Mode. The default for a lot of our files is going to be CMYK. Okay? This is the color type that's going to be helpful for when we're actually printing in color on a color printer like the large format printer. But for this, the laser engraver likes to work in RGB. So select RGB color, and then click on your design. All right? You can highlight the whole thing. If all of your design is black fill, that would work. You may have to do this for individual shapes if you have white overlapping shapes that are black. So any black shapes in your design that you want to be laser engraved need to be a specific black. Okay, so to do this, come over to your swatches. If your swatches panel on the right side is missing, you need to reset your essentials. So at the top of your screen, go to Essentials and Reset Essentials. Okay, it should reset your whole art working space, and your swatches should show back up on the right. Okay, so making sure that your fill color is selected, I'm going to come over to my swatches and choose this black color here. Now, you can just hope that this is the right black color, but I really don't want you to do that. I want you to make sure that it's the right color so that when we go to process this with the laser engraver, you know it's going to work the way that you want. So double click on your black swatch, and this window should pop up. Okay. For engraving, this RGB, the values need to be set to 0, 0, 0 in order for it to engrave properly. So make sure that that swatch is set properly, and once you save it, anytime you use this swatch, it will be 0, 0, 0. So when I go back to it, it shows up as 0, 0, 0 RGB. Okay, so that's the black color that you need to use. If you want to cut out a shape, for instance, if I wanted to make my design in a circle, right? I'm just going to draw a circle as an example. But say I wanted to do this, okay? I wanted to make a design within this circle and then cut it out. Now, this is only going to work for certain materials, right? I won't be able to cut any thick wood. I will be able to cut cardboard or paper or cardstock, those types of things. So check with me before you get set up for cutting out a specific shape. So if I want to cut out a circle, I need to set up my shape that I want to cut out with the proper stroke weight and the proper color. So we've already talked about black, and we know that the cutting color is red. So I'm going to come back over to my swatches, and I'm going to make sure that my stroke color is selected. And I'm going to click on this first red color. Now, if I double click on it, these values will show up. These are not the correct values for the red cutting line. In order to cut on the laser engraver, these values need to be 255, 0, and 0. That is what the laser engraver recognizes as a cutting color. So once I push OK, my swatch is going to update. I can double click it to make sure. Okay, notice it was saved. And now when I use this red swatch right here, it's going to be for cutting. Right? Now, aside from the actual color values, there's one more important factor when you're talking about cutting on the laser engraver, and that is stroke weight. The stroke weight for a cutting line on the laser engraver needs to be 0.001. Right? If I push enter, it's going to change it, and on my computer it seems to disappear. But notice if I click and drag over it, it's still there. The reason why you can't see it is because it's so thin. There it is. Okay, I'm zooming in really far so you can see this. It's so thin that you can't see it from so far away on the computer screen. That's okay. As long as it's still there when you select it, when you click and drag over it, like this, that's what it's going to cut. We'll verify this when we go on to the laser engraver software. Right? So this will work for any shape. It does not have to have a fill color unless you want it to. But those are the two colors, and those are some of the things that we need to be thinking about when we're preparing our files for laser engraving. There may be a few things that I've missed, and I may remind you of those during class, but this should give you guys a great start to get started setting up your file for laser engraving.